Greetings to you, Clint Scootcon with T360. I run our organized real estate division. I'll be flying alone here today, though I did bring not someone along with me, but a lot of some things. I've got a great deal of data to share back to you based on past 5 years of research work that we've done within the organized real estate division. I think many of you recognize the term organized real estate, but for those, as we wait for folks to come in, those who may be newer to the organized real estate division, what that means is that we work with associations and MLSs from across the country, whether that be, as we're going to really delve into today, research oriented or advisement oriented through our consultative work. We work with those associations and MLSs. And so we'll be sharing back with you a lot of details today. And then for those who do have questions, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. I will say this again, a lot of rapid fire data and slides today. I will reserve some time at the end to cover any questions that you do put into the Q&A for those that are joining us live. So just drop those in there as you go along, and then I'll circle back around them at the end. So I think we've got a good number of folks in here. So I'm going to go ahead and move us forward into this, as we've got a lot to cover today in a short amount of time. Just to kind of give, and it was a cathartic exercise for me. You know, it's like many of you when you do your day-to-day activities and you're just in it and you don't take that step back from it to realize just how much you do. This was a nice exercise for me to go through, to look back over the last 5 years and realize that our divisions applied over 5,000 plus hours of research and analysis into the organized real estate space. Within that 5 years, as many of you probably noted yesterday, the release of our almanac outlining the association and MLS rankings, and 5+ years of a collaborative effort with our friends over at the Real Estate Standards Organization. We really were excited to partner with RESO back in 2018 when we started putting together our real estate almanac and trying to better answer that question of how many MLSs are there, because before that there was a lot of ish. Even though we and our friends at RESO don't have the exact numbers today, we've been really able to go further and further into this process. And we've been able to classify now and track and report on over 1,300 organizations within the organized real estate space between associations and MLSs. So big shout out to RESO, to Sam for his ongoing support, and G-Sax, Greg, for all of you that know him. He's just been such a great partner to keep the details together. We've had to some of our survey work, which we'll share back to you here today, 130,000 responses across 100 plus organizations that we've been chronicling. That's led to, in order to get those responses, over 200 plus survey mechanisms that we've put together and executed across the various research aspects. 700 plus reports generated from that. We often, and thanks again to all of the MLS executives and association executives who participate in our research, because without you, we obviously don't have the baselines from which we'll be sharing today. But usually for those who participate, we give you back a report, at a minimum, a synopsis report. We appreciate your participation. We also appreciate your patience, because not only do we have the synopsis reports, but we've got the detailed reports and all those things to generate. So again, thanks to the industry as a whole for helping us with this. And 100 plus presentations to go along with that, including here today. So really fun to look back on 5 years and realize kind of the impact that we've had. I do have a warning as we start here today that there is a significant data nerd zone ahead, which I'm one of those wonks that just loves all of the data. But for those that maybe data is not your friend or your partner, lots of graphs, charts, slides, and numbers today. So just a warning as we jump into this. I want to start with our almanac. Again, it was just released to the 2024 edition of our almanac with MLS and association rankings. And so I'm going to give you kind of some higher level overview pieces and some drill downs from that. If you go online, you can see all of the MLSs listed by their member counts. This year, we added in an element related to the ownership types, which we think is going to be very important, by the way, as there's a lot of activity going on in the industry, a lot of questions about ownership structures and whether there'll be intervention from, DOJ, FTC, court rulings, whatever it might be. I think there are a lot more folks looking intently about their ownership models, but also access to MLS for non-members. And so we're looking at this 2024 data as a benchmarking year to see Will there be activity in the next 12, 24, and even 48 months against these potential changes? And so really a heavy benchmarking capacity to this year's report. So realestatealmanac.com, if you go there, you can see it. There's breakouts by region. So you can see the largest entities by region, whether they be associations or MLSs. You can see it nationally. At the highest level, we're tracking now 1,189 organizations, associations, and MLSs. Amongst those, we have 521 MLSs. As we break those down, and this is kind of something we started doing a few years ago, we're able to break them out into what we would call a local MLS versus a regional MLS. A regional MLS for us is an MLS that either has multiple shareholders or serves multiple marketplaces. Big and I think prominent examples of a regional MLS that's structured similarly to a local MLS in an ownership structure is HAR.com, but of course they serve a very, very broad swath. So they would technically be a regional MLS by our counts. There are currently, and again, important note here, we only track residential real estate associations. There are a number of commercial associations. We do not track or include them amongst this data. Amongst those residential real estate associations, there are 1,031 today. And this is again, as there are a lot of there's lots of conversation, and it's funny every time we put this out at the beginning of the year, what folks mostly want to say, well, was there consolidation? Is there more consolidation coming? And so there's always a lot of heavy focus on consolidation, and rightly so, especially around the MLS environment. But what we're tracking today is that 621 of the local associations are served by a regional MLS. And the reason that relates to consolidation is a lot of times when consolidation may or may not occur, it relates to that concern of the MLS's value proposition for the association or even the financial implications. But right now, 60% of all associations are served by a regional MLS. So it's been proven out that a majority of associations can live well beyond their direct ownership and control of revenue from the MLS itself. This, of course, was something we really started to be able to detail once we got beyond just, well, how many MLSs are there? Then we wanted to be able to say, well, what are the different types and sizes, and to be able to categorize them. And this year we actually are pulling in an additional element, which is the acknowledgement of the 50K plus MLSs. The way that we've gone about this over the years, the mega MLSs were all MLSs above 10,000, and there's certainly commonalities amongst them, but there's also significant differentiations between a 10,000 subscriber MLS and 100,000 or even a 50,000 subscriber MLS. And so we'll show you some data on that, but 9% of all MLSs in the country are above that 10,000 mark. You can see how that kind of trickles down. There's always this revelation, and I got a couple of calls yesterday of folks saying, man, it's still hard to believe that 42% of all MLSs in the country, of the 521, 400 of those MLSs that are out there, or the 220, I should say, of those MLSs that are out there serve under 400 members. But again, this is a reflective in many instances of our community. Our average size year over year went down a little bit with the MLSs, where there was slight overall dip in subscriber counts across the country, although not of real significance. I think just like the realtor numbers that have been tracking, we're expecting to really have, I think, a better sense of the decline or the rate of decline in terms of subscriber counts and member counts. I think in the first to the beginning of the second quarter of this year, we'll really start to see that. But average size went down to 3643, just a drop of 18. The median size did go up, and again, this has a lot to do with the organizations that are either coming together or going. But again, that's just kind of what it looks like across the full spectrum. I want to show this. This is one we always highlight, and it was included in our press release yesterday. But this is reflective of not only the MLS environment, but also our way our communities are structured. If you look at population across the country, 80% of all population in the country is concentrated in suburban or metropolitan areas versus the outlying areas. So 50% of all subscribers are served by just 3.8% of all MLSs. 20 MLSs serve 50% of all subscribers. With the addition of the 50K plus segment, which there are 7 of those in the country, we are able to note what percentage of all subscribers are served by those top 7 MLSs, and that percentage is 27%. So 27% of all subscribers belong to just 1.3% of MLSs. You get to 80% of all subscribers, by the way, when you get to 75. I noted this that we've added this year in our almanac the addition of the ownership types. Of course, MLSs have predominantly been owned and are structured around association directives and shareholders. But there are broker and broker owned entities out there. There are hybrid entities where a realtor association may be one of the shareholders along with other broker members. There's a private MLS that exists out in the country. And so this year we broke that out, and what we were able to see was is that association-owned MLSs do serve the vast majority, about 1.56 million of all the subscribers out there. The median size for those organizations is around 500. The average size is around 3,000. The broker and the hybrid MLSs, though, if you look at the average and the median sizes, they're much larger than those across the association ownership spectrum. And they serve about 18%. So about 1 in 5 of all subscribers in this country are served by either a broker owned or a hybrid MLS ownership structure. And again, this is where we're saying we think in the benchmarking standpoint with the potential changes that may be coming to some of the ownership and access structures for MLS participants and subscribers. We think this is an interesting year to denote that and see where do we go? Does this change significantly? Does it not change much at all over the coming years? So those are the MLS numbers and the MLS data. Looking at kind of the overall trajectory since we were tracking this back in 2018, there's obviously been a decrease in the number of MLSs. From we started out, if you look at the blue line here, total MLSs, we started out at 626 that we were tracking. We're down to 521 this year. That's a decrease of 16.7%. If you look down below that, we track those who are below and above the average of 3,600. And you can see that that's coming together. Percentage wise, if we look at this same numbers, just different graph, we look at it from a percentage standpoint. We essentially started out around that 90-10 proposition. 90% of all organizations were below the average size, 10% were above in 2018. And now 6 years later, we're at near an 80-20 proposition. So this is something that we've highlighted in past reports, and I talk about with clients, is that we've seen a lot of what we would call absorption over the last 5 years rather than consolidation, where you've seen a lot of the smaller entities joining up with larger entities just through we want to join you rather than we need to talk and we need to create a new entity together collectively. That said, in the last 6 months, we've heard a lot more activity on both the association and MLS side in terms of folks looking at the potential need for scale against a market correction and the potential future with fewer members and subscribers. We're hearing more about similar size entities who are wanting to come together and consolidate into a new entity. We'll see again if that impacts these numbers moving forward. Always interesting to see the counts. In other words, the number of MLSs by state. The largest counts still within Texas has the largest number. California second highest, and then Florida trails. Those are the big three in terms of the number of MLSs in the state. If you look up into the northeastern corner, we've had a lot more concentration around state level MLSs. And so you can see there are states that have single MLSs serving an entire state, but definitely not the norm. When you look at this, this is the number of associations, many more associations than MLSs. Again, that number is about 2x. There are about twice as many associations as there are MLSs, and that's reflected in the number of associations that exist in each state. Here, California actually has the largest number of associations at 98, trailed by Texas at 65, and then 49 in the Florida area, 47 closely behind in Georgia. What that leads to is a number we've been tracking for some time. This is an association to MLS ratio. So the larger the number, the more concentrated the regional MLS services are in any given state. So you can see again in the Northeast, there's a higher concentration with some consolidation or what we would call again more of an absorption rate that's occurred. Illinois actually is seeing and registering it at 6.7. So nearly 7 associations per MLS in the state of Illinois. And then another one that we're starting to see pop is there's continued, again, absorption happening in Minnesota. They're at about a 3.5 associations or 3.5 association per MLS there. So interesting conversion rates. The ones that are closer to 1-to-1 or below 1, those are the ones in which, we'll be interested in seeing how they handle all of the market corrections moving forward. Moving from MLS into the associations, here again categorized by size, we added in this instance here the 25K plus category into the mega associations. There are 4 of those associations that come in over 25,000, and then all the other mega associations are coming in above the 5,000 mark. So again, a big differentiation between 5,000 and 25,000. So we're denoting that in this year's report, all the way down to the micro associations, where those are under 200 members being served. Essentially, 2/3 of all associations have under 800 members in their membership. And what I would say about that is, while we oftentimes think about size and we think about scalability and technical capabilities with larger MLSs, regionalized MLSs, equating to better performance, we'll show you in some of our performance measurements that we've been doing with associations and MLSs over the last 5 years. That differentiation might not be as significant as one might think. But in particular, what we do note is that for associations, smaller associations with a higher level of connectivity, and especially those that don't provide MLS services, tend to perform better with their members. And we'll again show you some of that data before we're done here today. If you want to juxtaposition the percentage of associations that cover 50% of members with the MLS, here it's a larger number. It takes 63 associations, or 6% of all associations, to get to that point where you cover 50% of the members versus the 3.8% that MLSs serve. If you look at those 25K plus associations, they serve about 11% of the members. Again, delineating a little bit between the number and the size and type. Here, if you look in the box, association only, that means that they don't provide their specific MLS services. They, again, receive services from a regional MLS. That's about 60%. Not only is it at 60% of the organizations, they serve 60% of the members in the country. And again, the average size is around 1,500. Median is 504. But if you break that out and you really start to look at the association MLS, those numbers are a little bit different in terms of the size breakouts and constructs there. Here, this is something we highlighted in our release. If you read any of the stories yesterday that were out related to the Real Estate Almanac, because we track the realtor counts and we track subscriber counts, we're able to look then at the difference between the two of those categories. And so to be clear, there's a couple of differential factors here. There are, of course, those who are paying for duplicate fees. In other words, they pay to belong to more than one MLS to do business, whether by choice or compulsion. There are also states, and this is again relating back to that benchmarking year, and a lot of folks are looking at what does it look like to allow MLS services access to those who aren't realtor members. I myself came through Colorado, where many of the larger MLSs here allow for non-member access to the MLS. And so there's always been a difference in the subscriber counts to the realtor counts. Although it's not been overly significant in most instances, you can see here over the course of the last, I think it's 7 years now that we've been tracking, it's right around that 20% mark overall, and it continues to grow year over year over the last couple of years, to the point where there's nearly, 350,000, a little more than 350,000 more subscribers last year than there are members. And you'll see that number down below, the estimated 219.8 million. I'll have data on this later from our research around compensation and revenue structures in the MLS environment. But we estimate that what that means is an additional 219 million was spent in 2024 for those who are either non-subscriber members or non-member subscribers, I should say, or duplicate subscriptions. So over the course of the 7 years, we estimate that annually there's just under 200 million being spent by practitioners to access MLSs who are either non-member licensees that are accessing MLS services, or those who are paying for duplicate MLS subscriptions. What that looks like on the map, and you can see here, there's been a lot of conversation in the organized real estate space as there is this realization of what does it look like and what structures and changes might we need to make if non-members can access the MLS. And a lot of reference points go back to the Thompson states, which are in the southeasternmost portion of the US. There's also concentration and talk about Northwest MLS, which is up in Seattle, because that's a large broker-owned entity. And so You look at the numbers and the difference in terms of counts, and this number in Georgia is significant. Difference between the number of subscribers versus the number of realtor members. This one is a complicated and an interesting one in that you have two competitive MLSs in their largest metropolitan marketplace in Atlanta, on top of the fact that they have a significant number of non-licensed or non-member licensees who subscribe to MLSs, and so they have a big differentiation in the state of Atlanta. Also, similarly, here again in Colorado, a large number. California, they have a large number of folks, and again, they're in a state that has been dictated that you can't preclude non-member access to the MLS, so they have a larger number. Texas also having a number there that's fairly significant. So again, I'm spending a little time on this because we think this information as a benchmarking to track and see if there is movement and change within the ownership structures and access levels will be accelerating through the next few years, or whether they'll be retaining those levels. I want to pause here and say thanks. Again, if you dive into our real estate almanac at realestatealmanac.com, you can see all the breakouts, all the different levels and sources of information. But all the hours that go into this don't happen without underwriting support from all the friends that you see here on the screen. So we thank them for all those thousands of hours that we put into this to offset and to put all the great resources up that are accessible and usable by you all. I'm going to move us into some of our other research types, which is around, some core and ancillary tech studies. And I want to give you just an overview of all that we do. Again, here, this was maybe cathartic for me just to look back and see all the things we've done before I jump into the specifics of what we do. But we do a lot of MLS and association standardized performance surveys, and I'll show you that mechanism here in a moment, where we're asking the same questions and scoring in the same manner so that we can really test and see where associations or MLSs are performing well with their members and subscribers, and areas maybe where there's opportunities for improvement. We've done a lot around MLS platforms and AMS platforms. I'm going to share with you some of the high level items we've seen from our MLS studies over the last 6 years coming up today. We're doing work around MLS financial management. Again, we'll have some of this share back with you here, and we'll have more updated information coming in the next couple of months around revenue lines, top level revenue lines for MLSs. And moral of the story here is it's not nearly as much as I think the outside the real estate world thinks. We've looked at showing solutions. We've looked at lock boxes. We've looked at market reports and kind of what's happening in that space. Floor plans are an emerging piece of technology, ancillary technology in the MLS space. We've looked at forms. We've looked at the offer management. So really, again, just a comprehensive look in research and studies that we've done over the last 5 years, even looking at MLS data management, which is something, again, we'll be building on with more and more work this year. Jumping into those performance surveys that were mentioned, we do standardize scoring. We've been doing this now for 6 years, and we were able to establish a new T360 benchmark based on 5 years worth of data. We've been doing some benchmarking data against your contemporaries, but now we're able to have enough data that's occurred in the survey work that we've done across various marketplaces to create a new T3 benchmark on this 4-point scale. For MLSs, we measure satisfaction and value. We look at the direction and leadership of the organization, the support and services, the data outputs, and the technology delivery. For associations, we ask them about overall satisfaction, again, direction and leadership, the member support that's offered, the types of communications that are delivered, and then the core service measurements against education, advocacy, and what we would call connections or networking and benefits. Overall scoring, this again is our 5-year benchmark metric, so quite a bit of information that goes into this. What we see overall is that the subscribers, the members of the realtor associations and the subscribers of the MLS services believe that the services that they're getting are superior. A 3.38 overall scoring. This is based on the 5 performance categories for each of the different organizations we just outlined, is what we've seen over the 5-year performance period. There you can see it's 56 realtor associations, nearly 40,000 responses. Then on the MLS side, 52 MLSs and 96,000 responses. They net out with a superior rating on the MLS side as well. So what we find is that the vast majority of folks are satisfied with the services that they get. This is a further breakout of the specifics that go into determining each of the overall performance categories, broken down by satisfaction and value. Now we're looking at MLS, looking at the direction and leadership pieces. We look at the direction of the organization. Do they view their leaders as being representative and responsive from a support capacity? We look at their overall perceptions on support. And then we look at specific components like, is it friendly? Is it responsive? Is it knowledgeable? Services wise, we're asking about things like, the trainings that are offered, the compliance that's delivered, the communications that are given back. And so we measure that. The data, we look at overall satisfaction levels, and then we also look at specific components that provide the value, whether that's the timeliness, the reliability, the completeness, the accuracy. And then finally, we look at the technology pieces, which is in overall satisfaction, as well as the platform, the MLS platform performance, which will show you some additional details here coming up in just a moment. And then the components of those MLS platforms, from listing and entry to search to mobile to the client portals. We're looking at all of these in our standardized benchmarks, and you can see here the various scoring that's come out across all of this. The areas that struggle are once you get into the specificity of the MLS components themselves. In particular, we've seen over the years mobile and client portals are probably the areas in which the overall technology performances of MLSs rate the lowest, and mobile in particular, the one that we really have seen average scoring, where we don't see that across any of the other components. From that, we're not only able to create a benchmark overall, and you can see those benchmarking across the overall against all the different performance areas, but we're also benchmarking based on type, because we know there's a significant difference in approach between a regional and a local MLS. But as you can see here, while the local MLSs tend to win out in the scoring, save for the technology where it's a push, and again, this is the benchmarking score over 5 years worth of performance, there's a slight betterment of improvement on the local MLS level, but these are nominal at best. So really, regardless of type, and I can even say going into the size, scoring pretty much across the country comes out very, very similar. One of the areas where we see the biggest differences is in that leadership scoring, the direction and leadership scoring. And the larger the regional footprint, the less direct connectivity I think the participants and subscribers have. They tend to not see the leadership or know the leadership as well. And so I think that has an overall impact. But ultimately, a lot of similarity in performance. Also, a lot of similarity in performance over the years. This is each year's average. You can see the 5 years worth of averages here. You can see the T3 benchmark, the maximums, the T3 benchmark minimums in terms of overall performance against those categories. We did see both in the association and in the MLS environment last year a downturn in satisfaction scoring. Again, a lot of times that we think that the survey satisfaction levels relate to the overall satisfaction levels with the industry and the marketplace. And so not a surprise that I think last year, a difficult year for sales and activities and litigation and all those things, we did see scoring downturns in both instances. This is our association performance benchmarks going further into those 5 categories like I just did for the MLSs. And again, we're measuring overall satisfaction, the leadership against representation effectiveness, the support components, just much like what we talked about with the MLS. We look at the communications in terms of satisfaction, quality, and value. And then what's most important from my perspective in particular is we really try to differentiate the value and the performance of an association as a standalone entity without a reliance on MLS, coming down to those core services of education, advocacy, and connections. And you can see education performance is very, very high across the country. And the education delivered by the associations back to the practitioners is very well received. Advocacy has high value in some instances, but areas such as representation, it really is dependent and interesting on how the communities themselves have changed over the last few years, and what the makeup of the membership looks like. And then the connections and networking, we really saw interesting notes there. Of course, we had really different changes in what connecting and networking and benefits looked like through the pandemic and pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And we're still seeing those numbers come back around from the pandemic, which, by the way, were initially really high, then they dropped down, and now they've dropped off even more in this hybrid environment where I think a lot of folks are struggling to balance everything out. This, again, are all the benchmarking comparables against the 2022 and 2023 nationals. And what we're again seeing here is that association only entities, those who don't provide MLS services as an association, and this goes contrast to what everybody says, they don't value us, they don't like us if we don't have MLS. In contrast, those who are associations that are really focused on their association value proposition and have a connectivity level with their members actually perform at a higher rate. And here you can see the differentiation between the association and MLS combined and association only, much higher than, say, contrasting the regional MLS with the local MLS's performance over 5 years. So in instances here, like the core services, which I said, again, is a real heavy differentiating factor, there's a 0.05 difference. And for us at 0.05, that's when we would note an opportunity for improvement in our internal reporting mechanisms. So I wouldn't say it's a significant, but it's I think a notable difference in terms of performance. So again, as we go back to the question of consolidation, a lot of folks will ask, well, how many associations there should be? And to me, I'm not as concerned about association size and scale because of the connectivity aspects and the proximity to advocacy for the impacts and all that. What we're seeing here is that associations that stick to their lane actually do quite well with their members in terms of performance. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on here, but as I noted, we did see overall performance numbers going down to the lowest levels that we've recorded since 2019 in many instances across the board for associations. And again, I think a lot of that stands up against just overall satisfaction with the industry and the environment. I'll wrap up here with a couple of other pieces that, again, pull from our 5 years worth of data and analysis. Each time when we do these performance surveys, we also include demographic breakouts where you can really start to see who are you underperforming or overperforming against with as an MLS or an association. And interestingly enough, and again, against the framework of what's going on in the industry today, when you look at buyer's agents are the ones who tend to be happier, whether it's association, MLS services. We see that. So again, if we have fewer specific buyer's agents in our space, what does that do to overall satisfaction levels? It's something that I don't know that's been talked about or thought about. We see a lot of differences in terms of, those who are newer or doing less transactions that are just newer to the industry actually really are engaged with and involved and like the MLS and association services. Vice versa, those who do more transactions, who are in the MLS more on a daily basis, tend to have less of a feeling of satisfaction. And depending on kind of the time in the industry, it varies. One of the other interesting facts that we've gathered over the 5 years in terms of, what does this what does this segment mean for overall performance? Technology levels and comfort with technology actually are probably as much of a direct corollary as we've found. Those who are most comfortable with technology tend to value not only MLS services, but associations services higher than their peers. So interesting items that we've seen over 5 years. I'll highlight this and then move into some technology items here. I told you there's going to be a lot of information here, a lot of data, a lot of numbers. We've added in because so many associations and MLSs ask that question. We don't understand what our level of engagement is as an association, or we're unsure really what is the usage of our MLS like. So we've added into our survey mechanisms a new E-score and U-score where we actually are able to have the members and subscribers self-identify their levels of engagement and usage. And then we can create some new standardized scoring that will be able to stand up and use that to understand, is your association getting engagement from the end user's perspective, not the decision maker's perspective, from the end user's perspective? And likewise, are those folks using those MLS services or are they not using those MLS services, and to what degree? So what really becomes interesting on that is on those usage and engagement scores, again, when you can apply those against the various demographics, like, and not surprisingly, this is just an example from our MLS, the part-time with income folks are not using the MLS as much as those who are full-time. And you can see that reflected in the scoring here. And that's just one highlight, but you can really start to break that down and see, again, who's in the system and who's using it. I'm going to move quickly here, and we'll go a little bit quicker through these final slides here. I know I'm keeping you long here, but I wanted to show you this. We do a lot of research around the MLS platforms. Again, another primary consideration for MLSs. We know that Black Knight and FBS have the most implementations of platforms out there, where CoreLogic has fewer implementations, but they serve more because they have more larger clients. Again, we got a lot of questions last year around, well, how many clients does Rapatoni have when the outage was there? We're tracking at 22. These are 2023 numbers. I'm going to move past that. Well, this is a slide because we've been doing these MLS research platform research projects since 2019, and you can see the change overall by percentages in terms of who's gained market share across the MLSs, and the numbers on the denote that there are fewer MLS systems in the marketplace today than there were in 2019, but the percentages, yeah, you can kind of look at, and there's a lot of holding steady. Big change with Rapatoni. Again, we talked about this last year. They had already seen 50% of their market share go away between 2019 and 2023. So it will be interesting moving forward how they're impacted. While FBS saw a gain. The different MLS providers provided those services to different size entities, and I noted it. CoreLogic has the largest percentage of our mega MLSs, with 26% of mega MLSs in our survey work using the CoreLogic product. But again, here you can just kind of see the different client portfolios for the various leading platforms. By the way, we're only showing the ones that register at the highest levels. There are a number of other MLS systems included. And then again, same breakout here by regional versus MLS, or local MLS, what percentage. And again, the large percentage are local MLSs versus the regional MLSs. So it was always going to skew towards local, but percentage by percentage, CoreLogic being more balanced in their service provisions. Here, these are survey results from executives and staff. I want to clarify that. This is just general overall satisfaction levels and performance in our last 6 years that we've seen. Again, we've seen a precipitous decline from 2019 down to 2023. And even though it's an overall satisfaction, we've seen declines in specific areas, we've seen increases, but the perception and I think the expectations of the end user around the technology delivery just continues to go up and up and up as we see younger and younger members and subscribers coming into our portfolio. That's also reflected in overall Net Promoter Score. We're just tracking that. Again, you can see the downward shift from 2019 to 2023. So overall perceptions are really that's going down. Overall satisfaction with the primary platform, and here you can see it broken out by the various providers over the different iterations that we've done. We do this research every other year, and you can see the trajectory there, some bouncing around, some increasing, some going down overall. Quickly, this is pulling actually from the results of our subscriber surveys, the performance surveys, and we are able to score out here and show how they perform in overall satisfaction, with data performance, technology satisfaction, systems overall, and then the various components that I mentioned previously and how they score out. I will say here, this is not just a technology question, because we see significant differences in scoring between organizations, even if they have the same platform. So a lot of your training, your onboarding, those types of aspects impact how the technology itself maybe is viewed. It's not always just about the technology's performance, but rather the capability of the end user to use that technology. So again, we see different pieces here, and we included some proprietary, those who develop their own MLSs. And I will say, at least from the subscribers' responses we have, the proprietary is not performing at the same level in most instances, although in some areas there's some higher performance than what we see with the larger corporate or outside of MLS ownership entities. Finally, I'm going to jump into some financial management. I said we do some studies. This is from our 2023 data. This is what I mentioned we'll be updating in the coming months. But again, from the outside, I think everybody thinks, oh, the MLS makes so much money. But in reality, when we do our projections, what we're showing is that it's less than $1 billion generated by the 522 MLSs, which if you roll that out and you start to look at it, it's an average of 1.7 million. But because, again, the largest of the large are large and the smallest of the small are small, the median is just $345,000 annually. And this is just gross revenue, top line. If you break that down per subscriber, you can see it across the various segments. Mega, again, being those who are larger than 10,000, micros being those who are the largest or the smallest, under just 400. There is a difference in revenue per subscriber. Overall, we see about $608 on average in terms of that subscriber revenue being generated. And as I mentioned, it's very top heavy. In fact, the top 20, those 20 that serve 50% of all MLSs, are in fact seeing 48% of all of the revenue. The other 502, again, for our 2023 data, are sharing the rest of that. So it is a significant drop off. And if you get all the way down to the top 250, or essentially half of the MLSs, they're realizing over 900 million of that 950 million in revenue. So the bottom line, folks, are not seeing much revenue at all. And again, that's that issue of scale and capability as technology and data becomes more costly to deliver. And speaking of that technology, estimations, we did some projections here. These are just projected out, but it just again shows that we're not really flush with cash in terms of expenditures against our overall technology spends. And especially once you get beyond your core technologies of the platform itself and things like showing solutions, and you get into those ancillary products, we're showing only about $40 million left to spend across all 520 of those MLSs. So for our technology friends in the audience, this is why your vertical is a tough one to sell into, because there's just not a lot of revenue there. Finally, here we looked at some financial management resources against CEO compensation. And again, we'll be getting our updated numbers. These are 2023 numbers. We'll have the 2024 numbers coming. But again, the differentiation in service levels and capabilities is not only organizational, it's about the staff. If you look here, on average, the salary is about $158,000 and a median is about $115,000. But when you start to break that down further, those local MLSs is only 120,000. And by the time you break it down into some of the smaller, if you look at, like, say, the micros, for example, the smallest of the small organizations, they're paying $50,000 to their executive. And that executive is responsible in many instances for an association and an MLS. And so the capabilities that they're being called upon to deliver against the pay that they're getting versus, say, a mega MLS that's, charged with running, a staff of maybe as big as 50 or 60, very, very different. And very, very interesting. And there's some actual kind of, census related information that goes into that as well. And it's reflective again here on the scaling and why we're seeing, I think, this need for maybe larger entities. Again, not only is the overall revenue generation a little more efficient in the larger environment, there's less expenditures against overall staffing. Again, if you look at the bottom here, these were done in a range. That's why there's two sets of numbers. Micros, in some instances, on average, are spending 41% of their overall gross revenue on a single staff member versus a mega who's closer to 6%. So again, these are just some of the data efficiencies and pieces to look at in terms of this. So with that, I'll take a quick break here. I'll just see if I've got any Q&A items here to clean up. Staff. Do you know staff ratios? One of the questions. We have some of the staff ratios in our deeper reports, in our compensation reports, and we're adding to our compensation work that we're doing this year. Not only are we looking at the top level CEO salaries, but we're looking at COO and CTO salaries and scales. And with that, we do have the size of staffs as well. And that's included in our compensation reports. By the way, if you are an MLS exec out there and you want to get those, we'll be offering out our more detailed rather than our just synopsis report that we give back that would have those types of comparables in there. Will the execs receive the MLS performance benchmarking rater? Yes, we tend to, again, what we send back out is depending on, we have insider clients that have access to a lot of our full research activities. If you participate in, say, like one of our MLS platforms as an MLS exec, you'll get sent back a synopsis report. So it will contain some of, but not all of the details that we shared here today. So that's when we go back to, or we offer inside of a report, we say, do you want the option for the premier report? Those are the ones that you would have to purchase into that have the additional details. But if you participate in our surveys, you get back a complimentary synopsis report. If you didn't participate in one of those and you would like to get a copy, go ahead and send me an email, clint@t360.com, and we'll get those over to you. Also, if you'd like to talk about any of the information in more detail that we shared here today, you can go ahead and scan that QR code. That'll get you to my scheduling calendar, where you can select 15 minutes of time on my schedule where we can talk about all this, and I'll hopefully be able to breathe more than I did during this broadcast when we talk one-on-one. But again, I want to say as we close out here, thank you to all our partners, from vendor partners who have been so gracious with us. All the MLS platform providers have been so amazing, opening up, showing, learning, helping us to learn their systems as they're iterating, and then allowing us to give back this feedback. All the MLS executives and staff who participate, association staff, we truly appreciate it, because without that, we can't get this industry scale data back out to the industry as a whole. So many thanks to all of those who have helped us to amass all of this data over the last 5 years. And I thank you again for your time and your patience, and hopefully you got your serious data nerd on today with all the charts and graphs. And we will be making this replay available, so you can go back and review and look at all the details that we shared with you today. So with that, thank you so much. Have a great day. Go out, get your own data out there. Make some good decisions. Data helps with making those right decisions rather than the emotional decisions, and that's something our industry can use right now. We appreciate you. Take care.